Gatsby here. Anyway, I'm angry. No, let me explain. I'm doing script rewrites, and I already know this is going to be the longest video I've potentially ever made, so yeah, I have a point, and I'm not angry just to bait out clicks. First off, yes, it took a long time. I needed to watch a live-action version of Kaiji in a 4-hour video about why Black Widow is the end of Marvel Phase 4. This is going to be a review over the second half of the show, and a conclusive how I feel about the whole series now that it's over, and if you're here to listen to me bitch about how the first half was borderline unwatchable, then I left the link in the description. Go watch that video. If you don't have the attention span or desire to listen to me complain, then the short of it is 15 episodes of rushed evolutions followed by 15 episodes of hoping to get more Joe and Mimi, but only be given more Ty and Matt. That being said, it feels like the first and second halves of the show were handled by completely different studios. We can blame most of the quality issues on The Plague, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a reboot of one of the most iconic Pokemon ripoffs of all time that everyone loves so much they won't even catch the rest of the sentence of me saying that I'm joking because they're almost done typing death threats in the comments. That of course is also a joke because none of my videos have any comments. To have comments would require viewers, and to acquire viewers people would need to share my video. But yeah, thanks for making 1 through 30 my first video to break 1,000. Alright, I'm done begging, let's go ahead and get started. So yeah, from here on out, spoilers for the rest of the video. If you want to know if it's worth watching, then yeah. Second half is pretty solid, 7 out of 10. Has some series highs and some pretty mid-range lows, but it's definitely worth checking out. So I'll start with characters, going from the ones that I didn't really care for, ending with the ones that I fucking loved, and then I'll talk about the main story beats, ending with my overall thoughts on the show as a whole. Given an ensemble cast of 8 characters and their Digimon, if you've watched the show, then this is the part where you tell me Sora deserves to be higher on my list. Sora has always been a sore topic for me, and it's not just because of shipping purposes. I've always felt like this character didn't really have much going on, and the show didn't really do her much service either. Each character in this half gets a couple of episodes to characterize traits that should have been better defined earlier, so I'm going to go over a few per character. Starting with the episode that begins with birds who can't fly getting turned into fruit, which probably woke up something in someone fetish-wise given Digimon's track record. It really solidified the trait of Sora being Ty's friend, given their soccer antics, and really it's not mentioned much afterwards. The 2 episodes I really want to talk about are the episodes where Sora is on Volcano Island with the weird safety beaver. The first episode has Sora being a massive bitch and gets Biyomon hurt, only for them later to realize that they need to work together as a team, and honestly whatever. This episode is heavily overshadowed by Tears of Shikakumon. We get a Crest Journey episode for Sora that revisits the guys at the volcano to find out why Shikakumon has PTSD, and what's crazy is how much better this episode works than any previous episode for this character, expressing her love for the tormented soul of Shikakumon. I'd be willing to say this is probably an all-time high for this character in my opinion. I don't hate this character, I don't hate any of these characters, but Sora was by far the worst character in this reboot through no fault of her own. She offered very little in the first half and was mostly relegated to just being around Tai from time to time when they remembered she existed. Next up is Akari and Tailmon, which yeah, I'm just gonna call them Kari and Gatomon. I'm a little surprised that I'm having to put them this low because in addition to being late to the party, so you'd almost expect less, in the original we had the Myotismon plot, which is one of my all-time favorites. This time around we have Gantomon being Skull Knightmon, which is also a really interesting direction to take the character. And at the end of the first half, Kari just follows Skull Knightmon, which seemed really stupid. After the halfway point, we get 3 episodes of Gantomon back to back, which felt really good. We even had a neat conflict of, if I evolve, I lose myself to the darkness that's plaguing my heart, which sounded straight out of Kingdom Hearts. We get 2 other episodes of giant Digimon fighting and ultimately becoming a force, which was really nice, but for me, Kari and Gatomon really only shined bright for their first 3 episodes, which is a bit of a shame. Next up is Izzy. Why is Izzy this low on my list? Unlike the previous 2 characters, Izzy has a lot of great interactions. Unfortunately, 90% of the time, the lines are directed at mainlining plot points from his laptop. It's not all negative though, because the second half of the show really seemed to understand this character and put him in a creative zone. Operation Satellite Sniper was not only great for debuting Blitz Greymon, but also gave Izzy a chance to really show exactly how smart he is by giving him an insane premise to work off of. Later in the show, we get a literal trash can explaining that he's very good at inventing, and we get another insane premise to work off of. Not to mention the fact that we get an armor evolution without using eggs, so that was something. But in his last hurrah, Izzy's Crest Journey has him solving riddles against Datamon to help save Whalemon. And as good as this episode was, I really just want to mention it because Whalemon showed up super early in the show, and I figured they would have used him sooner than later instead of waiting 60 episodes to beach him and fake light him on fire. These episodes are all nice, but just like the second half of this season, a lot of these episodes feel misplaced. It's almost as if you could have had these episodes occur sooner than later, and it's not fair to put all the blame on Izzy though, because you can kind of apply this statement to almost all of the episodes in the second half of this show. I figure I was going to rank you way lower given the rest of the episodes that you were in on the first half. You were a test on my ability to not drop this show like Dun Devimon did to your brother, but here we are. Obviously at this point, holy Digimon have been defined as literal gods, which yeah, I'm going to talk about that literal god tier fight later, but compared to the original, I think I like TK and Patamon a little bit more in this season than I did in the original. So in TK's first episode, we get a heart-to-heart between my favorite Jelly Bean and TK on the fast travel mon, and of course with the spectacle of Pegasus mon, I'm like, where's Nefertimon? Ah well, my jaw is still on the floor from them actually referencing Shadow Seraphimon. Later we get the amusement park episode, which was a solid smaller story where TK jumps into a Waru Monzemon to inspire another batch of jelly beans to have hope. The episode I really want to talk about though is the Sword of Hope, where Sephirothmon shows up, so that's another reference for the boys on the frontier, and basically he functions the exact same way. After capturing a batch of the Digidestin, they have to fight things from their past leading up to Angemon fighting Devimon. The whole fight's great, but what really brings it over the top is the resolution. Angemon and TK talk it out and trust that even though he's super strong, he's still not going to hurt TK, leading up to him turning into Magna Angemon to finish out all the Devimon clones. After they're out though, Devimon gives a few lines to show that he still exists within Magna Angemon, and they even use the design of Magna Angemon's dark arm to symbolize this like he's Liquid Snake. It's a damn shame though that we didn't really get too much more of the schizo jelly bean with Devimon popping in and out to shake up the excitement from time to time. Magna Angemon calls him his old friend, and we basically just accept that yeah, he's a part of him now, and that's a really unique twist on a personal favorite. We did get a reminder though in the second to last episode, and man, I really just hope we get more creative decisions like this, because this is really what I wanted out of this show. Oh, also TK pushed a turtle up a mountain. Anyway, here's his brother. It's difficult to explain, but man had some really great episodes, and I guess I should start with the episode where Gabumon got crucified. Elecmon got crucified next to Gabu. Blazing Blue Friendship was easily one of my top 5 for the whole season, even if it wasn't the Mega Evolution episode. Instead, we had a racing episode, which, I don't know, for some reason the writers said, yeah, let's do a racing episode for Garurumon, because he runs faster when he's with his friends. I'm not saying that they're bad episodes, but I feel like their purposes could have been switched. Later on, we get a Crest Garurumon episode, which, yeah, Alter S is coming, but I am a bit sad because Matt was a really strong character in the first half of the show, and even in the second half of the show, he followed through. Out of all of the pairs, you really feel like he is a very good friend to Gabumon. What's better is when he's with Joe, he's comedy gold as he's constantly reluctant to be friendly towards the guy. But I really feel like they just didn't give him enough to do on the last half of the show. Look, I'm not even gonna act like I'm not biased. Mimi's Andromon episode was the best one in the first batch, and if you don't agree with me, then go to the montage at the end of the season and tell me why that's the only episode from the first half that was showcased. First, we get Mimi-chan Wars, where she refers to all of her friends as employees, and we get a nice look into the background home life of Mimi. Followed up by the Edamon Volcamon concert battle to determine who's the real king of Digimon. They even end up crowning Ponchomon as royalty, while also giving some of the best character moments in the entire series. I'd even be willing to say the episode I enjoyed the least from Mimi still holds up pretty well against everyone else. Almost every single time we get Mimi on screen, it's guaranteed to be good, and that doesn't sound like a coincidence to me. But that being said, there is another. Joe is literal perfection, and this is not an opinion, this is a bona fide fact. Every single time his character is on screen, he manages to elevate the content, and during the episode where he worked with Matt to crucify Gabumon, he listens to the demonic chants of Mephismon and goes, yeah, I'll show you what a real nightmarish chant sounds like, and breaks out the cram school notes. In the very next episode, he befriends a Digimon over being French fry enjoyers, which ends up in Joe swinging an empowered, enchanted Zudomon hammer, unleashing a fraction him of his power of Ultra Instinct Joe. In my favorite two-part story of the series, we get Joe returning to the hot springs that he was stuck in for the first half, only to realize that it's been taken over by a Shogun Gekumon who's looking for a bride in Gomamon. This is followed up with the Joe and Mimi combination episode, which is an absolute banger alert. Mimi pushes Joe into his rightful position as leader, which ends up in him understanding the trials and tribulations of an Olegmon after being captured. Joe knows there's only one way out and asks for trial by combat, with the only possible result being the outcome. Joe is crowned Shogun of the Pirates. This is what the show should have been. There's time for spectacle and there's time for big overarching plots, but for some reason we only get good character work like this on the second half. Are you seeing a pattern yet? Finally, you. You are the reason. The more I watched this show, the more I came to resent seeing you every single episode. But that's not your fault, and it's not that simple, because that was your function. Tai is a self-insert. He acts like a character a few times, like when he turned into a fruit or the Machine Dramon episode, but for the most part, he's reduced to just being the perspective of the viewer. And I hate it. And if you think I'm insane, then watch a Crest episode where he fast travels into each of the stories despite them being scattered all over the place simply for the sake of being there. Unlike Joe, Tai doesn't elevate most of the episodes he's in, but that's not to say that he doesn't have a couple of episodes that did work well for the character. The Wasteland episode was great and required Tai to work with Noemon, whose design is one of my favorite in the season. Just look at this guy, man. I gotta love it. Tai has to rescue Joe while Agumon rescues Gomamon through some funny improv, and the Rebellymon episode was super solid too because it didn't have to spell it out that Rebellymon was Ogremon. It even gives a nice nod to the function of partners, which adds to the overall story. Contact from Catastrophe has Argomon trying to see if Agumon can find the real Tai through knowledge of knowing how he would act in a life or death situation, and yeah, I don't even have to think twice about it. Crest of Courage is Tai at his best. Tai is transported to another world where he finds a Baltamon that he's quick to save, and then he keeps getting attacked until eventually Tai attempts to save Baltamon by sacrificing himself as the distraction, only to be saved when Baltamon becomes Greymon. The episode even gets better because it goes over some more plot significant stuff while reminding the viewer that, yeah, Omnimon is absolutely going to kick the Great Catastrophe's ass, and if you're not already waiting for that, you should be. In a sea of mediocrity, I expect each Tai episode to put me to sleep. Instead, I get a near-perfect Crest Journey episode, and I shudder to think about how I would have felt about this episode if Tai wasn't being shoved down my throat weekly. So now that we've got our characters, let's talk about the story. Right away, we get a small recap where Lopmon does Lopmon things and tells the kids that they need to take the car from Dumb and Dumber to Faga, and yeah, that's actually the name. YouTube, please don't hurt me. Until episode 48, though, the cast periodically says they're getting closer to Faga, as if it actually means anything to anyone who isn't spoiling themselves with plot synopsises of episodes months in advance. Once they actually get to Faga, we get 3 great episodes, starting with Machine Dramon vs. War Greymon, which concludes with a fake-out death for Tai so that Mimi can continue being one of the best characters in the entire season. Following that, we get one of the largest scale Digimon fights in the history of the series, along with an anime debut of Zed Millenniummon getting killed by totally not a spirit bomb. Thanks, Dragon Ball Super staff. Watching this week to week, I got to these episodes and thought, they have like 17 episodes left though, what are they gonna do now? Well, then I remembered we still have to do a Crest Journey. You remember the Crests, right? Of course you do. That's right, thankfully we flesh out these characters with some of their best episodes yet, and all it took was a slight detour right before the end of the show. All of this while the Great Catastrophe is still approaching, leaving me to think that they were referring to the writing staff's inability to create a cohesive narrative-driven journey. After the Crest Journey, we finally get an explanation about all the bad stuff happening on Izzy's laptop was because of this catastrophe thing, and then this guy shows up. And I'm sorry man, but you can't expect me to be intimidated by this guy who isn't even as tall as the tree when we just concluded the last fight with Zed Millenniummon. Anyways, he gets his ass whooped and they go up to fight the final boss and... Let's go! Ooh, yeah, I'm not gonna call him that. You're gonna be referred to as Charlie. Charlie breaks into the real world with this massive exposition dump right at the very last minute about how, yes, this guy was the evil who existed the entire time. He's the real problem. He's the thing that the Argomon kept talking about. It was all Charlie. And I really liked how they did something similar to the original, with the digital world being observable in the sky from the real world. And the last few episodes had one of my favorite fights of all time with incredible animation, but no, I'm not gonna show you any of that fight because I had to suffer through this show, and you should have to as well. So after watching it and spending what'll probably be a month or two editing a video that 20-something people will find palatable, here's what I thought about the show. I think the main stories were handled very poorly. In previous seasons, you get a general sense of progression through episodic adventures, but here you only get a bunch of floating plot lines that are only tied together with the titular character Tai. On the first half, and yeah, you know this is going to be bad if I have to compliment the first half of this season, but you get a general sense of progression through Izzy. He at least gives you a general sense of direction on where they're headed, and it all leads up to Tai, Matt, and TK meeting Digimon. The second half of the show just felt like a bunch of episodic cuts of characterization that didn't really advance the narrative too much until they realized, oh yeah, we probably should mention Faga or Charlie soon. Don't get me wrong though, the second half of the show is obviously more entertaining. The problem I'm having though is that these episodes better characterize the cast and should have been held at the front end of the show while the big plot movers are handled in the back. Or at least balance it out a little bit better rather than filtering out half of your viewers because you pushed 14 episodes back to back of Digi-Evolution episodes. You could make the argument that we really didn't need to service the traits of the cast because everybody knows, Tai is courageous, Izzy is knowledgeable, and Gabumon got crucified. Fuck, I mean, that's really a weak excuse. If you're gonna reboot the series, you need to do the legwork rather than just pitch it purely on spectacle, which is what I felt when we were getting all the Ultimate Evolutions so early in the series. What was probably my most hated thing in the series is how boring most of the character interactions felt, though at no point did I feel like the kids were in conflict with each other. Except maybe when Joe or Mimi were on the screen and people constantly felt uneasy about the self-proclaimed leader or president. Even background and environment-wise, we didn't really get too many interesting landscapes barring a couple of episodes, but for the most part kids are just in the nondescript force number 12. There's nothing really iconic here. Originally I did complain though that there weren't enough sentient Digimon friends in the first half of the show, but the second half of the show amended that, so good for them. Finally, and I know talking about brevity at this point in the video is probably the funniest unintentional joke I've ever brought to paper, but the original adventure was 13 episodes shorter than the remake, and I feel like we ended up with so much less. The worst thing here is that while I was watching this, I was doing a first playthrough of Digimon Cyber Sleuth over on twitch.tv/theaveragestream, which at this point, if you're still watching, you're legally obligated to drop a follow. But if they could tell a successful story that weaves elements of time travel and creepypasta side stories with decent character writing into a game with a silent protagonist, then how the hell am I supposed to defend this show? At the end of the day, Digimon 2020 was a show to watch and say, oh, I remember those Digimon from seasons I actually cared about, and then forget about most of the episodes by the time the next week's episode rolled around. After watching it once, it's really obvious to know that this season will be remembered for some of its high highs and complete fumble of a first half. I'm not going to say the show was a complete waste of time though, because I enjoyed it, and trust me, that's saying a lot. But I'm angry because I look at this season and I know that if it was just paced out slightly better, I could actually recommend it to people who are looking for a more recent installment rather than just telling them to watch the original. After I finish editing this video, Digimon Ghost will probably have concluded, so if people want me to talk about that or maybe some of the other shows, hit me up in the comments, but after this massive project, I probably need to take a break to talk about some shows I actually enjoyed. I feel like I'm missing something though.